This episode of the Troxel Podcast is made possible with support from ArchIT. Are you tired of standard IT services that miss the mark? Choose ArchIT for specialized, proactive IT management, BIM support, and robust data security tailored for architects. Whether you're a team of 10 or a growing firm of 50 plus, ArchIT understands the architecture industry and will empower your unique creative vision to enable you to do your best work. Embrace a technology team that enhances, not hinders, your design process. Visit getarchit.com for your free IT assessment and start transforming your firm and your tech experience today. That's getarchit.com. Welcome to the Troxel Podcast. I'm Evan Troxel. If you are a regular listener and are enjoying these episodes, please subscribe both on YouTube and in your preferred podcast app to let me know that you're a fan of the show. Being a subscriber, which is completely free, directly influences my ability to attract sponsors that help keep this show going and my ability to attract the guests that you want to hear from. My goal is to deliver quality episodes that provide value to you and our industry. So if you haven't subscribed, I encourage you to do so. As I mentioned, it's free. And it's a great way to support Troxel. And for those of you who are in a position to support my work directly, you can become a member. To learn more about the perks of membership and to join, simply click on the Join Us button at trxl.co. Your support is incredibly valuable for the sustainability of this show, and I deeply appreciate it. In this episode, I welcome Roderick Bates back to the podcast for the third time, and this time we are joined by his colleague, Cam Starr. Roderick is the Director of Corporate Development, and Cam is the Chief Product Officer at Chaos. In this episode, we have a casual and candid conversation about what's going on in the visualization space in AEC, how AI and spatial computing is and will be affecting the profession, and what's on the horizon at Chaos Enscape. We also explore how real-time technologies can enhance workflows beyond just visualization tools for informed decision-making on energy use and building performance. We also discuss their new partnership with the Illuminating Engineering Society, also known as IES, to enhance their tools' capabilities and steer it in a new direction. This was a fantastic conversation with Roderick and Cam, and I hope you'll not only find value in it for yourself, but that you'll help add value to the profession at large by sharing it with your network. So, without further ado, I bring you my conversation with Roderick Bates and Cam Starr.
Honestly, I don't understand how people say it goes faster as you get older, because that is not my experience. Like, oh boy, things like, it's not that the days are long, but there's a lot going on. And even if I was to summarize like what happened in the last 4 weeks, it feels like it's a whole year's worth of work stuff. So yeah,
That's true.
maybe it's because, I don't know, maybe people say it goes faster when the days go slow, the years go fast. No, it goes really slowly. What are you talking about? I don't know.
What made sense to me was when I heard it explained like this. It was, okay, so when you're 16, right, a year is a 16th of your life. And now I'm 49, so a year is a 49th, right? And so just that compression right there is why it feels like it goes so fast, because the older you get, it's a smaller slice.
That sounds like a good story, Evan, but I'm sorry, there's absolutely no truth in it whatsoever. I think what you'll find is it depends on how much you learn and what new experiences you have. Because, at your age, you could spend this year traveling the world and seeing a different city every single day, or you could be 16 and be stuck in somewhere experiencing the same thing. You cannot tell me that, that felt like a much longer time. No, it's the number of new experiences that you have on a kind of a, in 1 year. How many new experiences do you have? How many new things do you learn? How many new things do you think about or do you see? If those are reduced, and when you're 16, there's an awful lot out there in the world which you haven't heard or seen, and everything seems new. And so your experience of the world is that, oh my God, so much happened. And maybe, if you're my age, 49, about to be 50, like, it could feel like, well, I didn't learn anything last year. Now, that's definitely not true for me, because, I'm ferocious when it comes to reading and picking up new things, and whether it's a language or a topic or whatever. And actually, as I get older, I do that even more and more and more. I've read more books every year than I've done the previous year. It's like not quite hitting the exponential, because it's not possible humanly.
Yeah.
But I think that's what it comes down to. It's not the number. I know exactly what you're saying, but it's not that. It's how many new experiences did you have? And certainly at 16, you're bound to have many more experiences for the first time. Whereas it's kind of hard to get to our age and have a brand new, like, eat a food that you've never had before, or come across a new, scientific or political, historic, cultural, some new idea that you'd never heard of before. So it becomes harder to live that kind of a life of new insights and untrodden paths.
What I think is unique about you, though, Cam, is that for most people, they get into that sort of that repetitious groove. Then there's the reduced anticipation of what's next, or the uncertainty. And so that's part of where you're like, oh, that year went by in a blink because of exactly what you're describing. Whereas when you're young and foolish and whatnot, everything is these experiences that seem to be so massively consuming and emotionally consuming as well.
Yeah.
You get to my age or our age, and things are kind of like, the emotional ups and downs really start to compress to some degree. And I think that's part of, like, with my kids, like, say, when's Christmas coming? It is truly anticipated for months. Whereas for me, the Christmas anticipation is
right.
It's pretty modest.
And
so as a result, it's like, because you don't have all that thinking about it, it seems to go by faster. But it's the opposite effect, which I think is quite interesting, that for you, like, the more you have going on, at least on your end, regardless of anticipation or not, it makes it feel longer. Whereas for me, the busyness and all of that, in fact, would make it feel faster. Like, my weeks go by short because I can't complete everything.
Right. Yeah, it's like when you're young, you have your whole life ahead of you. My youngest is 17, and he's constantly kicking the can down the road for it doesn't matter what it is. It could be putting the plate into the dishwasher, or it could be a bigger, like, getting a driver's license.
So you're telling me I got 10 more years of this to look forward to, huh?
Yeah, so he's always like, yeah, I got plenty of time to do that. And now look at us. We're like, we're out of time. We I got to cram it all in. I got to live 5 lives at the same time because I want to do it all. And
you got to learn fly fishing. You got to do the road trip.
Yep.
You got to master the next task or read the next book.
Right. Yeah. I think that there's something to all of this that is playing into it. Well, maybe we can just kick this off, and I can welcome you both to the show. It's great to see you again, Roderick. This is 3rd time around the Troxel.
People are start getting bored of me.
Solar system. Never. And Cam, welcome to the podcast for the first time. It's great to have you both here today.
Great to be here.
And we got to catch up a little bit at Autodesk University at the Chaos Endscape booth, and you were both gracious to kind of share things that are going on in the world of architectural visualization. There's a lot going on at Chaos. I recently spoke with Peter Mitev, who you both know well, and obviously I've had some nice conversations with Dan Monahan as well. And this is just another opportunity to share what's going on. Before we go there, because I'm really interested in what you guys are seeing. You're super tied into a cross section of AEC that I think is a lot of people are interested in hearing about. We're seeing so much happen right now, especially in the AI side of things. But the visualization landscape is changing, right? And I'm interested to talk about that. But before we do, and maybe Cam will kick off with you, just give us an idea of where you've been, what you're working on, what makes this problem interesting to you. Why are you operating in this space?
Sure. I started early. I've been into 3D since before 3D. That's how it feels. I was kicking around, making little 3D simulations on a graphics calculator in the 80s. and in the 90s, even late 80s, getting into the Amiga and playing around with that. And for my sins, I studied architecture, which, is the kind of forces you to think about space, forces you to think about design, the intersection, and how to really effectively communicate it, not to just your end client, but to everyone else who's engaged in that process, and how to better help folks understand what your intention is, what the outcome would be. I only remembered this just a very short while ago, that actually my master thesis in the mid 90s, and that's the 1990s, was the title of my thesis was Artificial Intelligence in the Built Environment.
Wow.
And I went and dug it up. It's still printed in Sheffield University, and it was just like, oh my God, I really thought we would have AI in the built environment in the 90s. Wow, where is the AI in the built environment? And of course, the last few years, it's been a huge explosion of that. But my journey was through architecture, then architectural visualization, and really where I was face to face with people who were drawing perspectives and coloring it in with watercolors. And I sat with some of them, and they would kind of look and go, oh, this computer stuff, no one's, it's never going to be as interesting as what we do. But actually that became one of the most effective ways to, and I don't mean to belittle this because it's a really important thing, to sell buildings, to sell them to customers, to sell them to planning people, to sell them to potential folks who would have to live with it. After quite a few years of that, about 4 years of that, I just felt there's got to be more, and I wanted to start to apply gaming technology into this space. So I ended up late 20s setting up a company that was focused on the use of gaming technology outside of pure entertainment. So actually, the very first project that we did was a large-scale visualization of a very large. When I say very large, it was a very large site of 2,000 buildings, and we used gaming technology to not just visualize it, but to let you drive around it in a kind of a GTA style with a little map, so you could kind of go around and have little missions to find various buildings on this enormous site, which has normally about 120,000 people on it. You can imagine it's just huge.
Wow. Yeah.
That kind of got into this whole idea of gaming and gaming tech used for communicating concepts, ideas, whether they are about history or whether they're about science or they're about health or they're about finance or politics. Really applying this kind of simulation thinking, but then always coming back to gaming technology. And why gaming technology? Well, frankly, for up until quite recently, that's where you found the best real-time 3D. That's where you found, the mechanisms of gaming lend themselves well. They kind of require, not lend themselves well, but they require like the highest fidelity the technology can kind of bring to bear, and on a consumer level, accessible level. So I got completely enthralled into that, and over the years, that kind of grew into, what about AI? Now I've always had a real keen interest on people. From a behavior perspective, I'm a kind of an armchair behavioral economist. I ended up doing a PhD around competition, collaboration, and groups of people, teams of people working together, and personalities, and how you could best use things like gamification or framing to get people to work really well together. And that kind of led into this space of affective AI. And can computers give you a better understanding of how you are feeling than maybe an expert? It turns out, really surprisingly, computers can be trained, or a computer model can be trained to recognize emotion better than any other human can. Why? Because that computer model can contain tens of thousands, perhaps even hundreds of thousands of hours of training, whereas the human would only have a lifetime of training. And that was really fascinating. It's really interesting in how you bring that to life, how you visualize that. And then life took a little bit of a change, and I fancied it a little bit of a change. So I helped grow an automation company for a few years. And after that, actually Chaos came along. I got a knock on the door. Said, hey, we're doing 3D. I said, oh, what kind of 3D? Architectural visualization. I kind of looked at him and went, oh, that's what I was doing 20 years ago. It's what's happening in this space. And the more I looked, the more it was clear that this space is going through probably one of the biggest revolutions that it has done since it started, from using computers to visualize. And the reason, and I don't say that lightly, the really step change in software like Enscape, and of course V-Ray has been around for 25 years now, but something like Enscape comes along, and it democratizes visualization, and I, again, that's not said lightly. This is the idea of something that was really specialist. You really had to go and trained, understood, learn the software, figure out how to light things, how to apply materials, how to set all of that. And suddenly, hey, I'm just doing my design in SketchUp, or I'm just doing my design in Revit or what have you, and I can get something that is good enough. That looks pretty damn good. This stuff looks really good. And that democratization.
Never mind the technical side of even setting up the deployments to render a good V-Ray scene.
Right.
Real time, right? 60 frames a second. And of course, in the last 2 years, finally AI is getting some airtime. For those who've been very close to it for very many years, we've been kind of watching it and maybe involved in some ways, but it's that kind of a nature of the exponential. 2 years ago, we get the first inklings of GPT, and people are like, that's never going to replace somebody who can write a good sentence. You sure? Do you know how exponential works? Because that looked like 5%. Yeah, but then it'll be another 10 years before it's any good. Yeah, but you don't understand. This is not a linear progression. This is exponential. And we're starting to see that even more and more so with the rise of the large language models, but then applying that and seeing that in the visualization domain, it's getting to the point where anybody should be able to visualize whatever they've got in their head. And that's the kind of expectation, but that's also the challenge of what was in your head. Because is what you're seeing on the screen that came out of the latent space of a stability or a mid-journey, is that what you really had in mind? Or is that just what you're seeing out of the end of a prompt? And you kind of say to yourself, yeah, that's what I had in mind. And I think that's the real challenge.
I like that. Yeah.
But that's the challenge for us too, right? It's threading that needle between those two pieces. How do we as a company ride that exponential curve or exponential growth? Or alternatively, how do we avoid becoming cast to the wayside and becoming like the telephone switchboard operators of yore, right? I mean, that's the challenge that we have. And I think what's great about having someone like Cam here who's been tracking this industry for so long is that it puts us in a position to sort of ride the lightning, so to speak, here, as opposed to becoming a dinosaur. And it's really put us into a much more proactive position. Thank goodness, because it frankly will be an industry that will be fundamentally different in a few years.
It's interesting to think about how fast this has come on. And I mean, real-time rendering isn't that old, and you're already talking about it like it could be thrown to the wayside because new technologies have come along, and that time frame just keeps getting shorter and shorter and shorter of what is the next wave that's coming. It's very interesting to see that happen and play out during our lifetimes in such a fast manner. That's
the question too. Like say, is it cast to the wayside, or has this become a combination of the two? Right, sort of this Borg, if you will, half human, half AI type interface. And I think from our perspective, that gets to what Cam was talking about, where there's the real opportunity there. Is like, is this exactly what you intended?
Mm-hmm.
There's no way that a machine can infer intent necessarily. Right? It's just that's in the mind of the designer. But at the same time, there's so many things that we're seeing that AI does faster, just faster. And it has all that experience. So how do you combine those two pieces effectively to help our users get to where they want, their visualization they want, as faster or as quickly as possible? I think that's really the angle that we're taking with this, is that it's the combination of those two forces that has the best opportunity for success, as opposed to complete supplanting. Although I do think there will be a lot of replacement of things that are, say, very low quality, or tools that are very crude and things like that. And why not just go for a full AI solution if it's better?
Well, the expectation keeps rising. The expectation of variety, the expectation of insight. One of the things that we saw pretty much out of the gate when Stability and Midjourney were in their early phases, and I don't think they're in their late phases, by the way. We're still in the relative early phases. But a year ago, those who were blazing a trail in this space were already using these tools for ideation. They were already using them to generate a whole variety of very interesting looking things, some of which you definitely would never be able, or maybe never would want to build. But they would defy gravity, or just the pure laws of physics or usability. And as we're seeing more and more focused effort in this space, from the use of generalized tools to more specifically trained tools that you could take a latent space, an image generation, and then train it on a particular artist or a particular architect or a particular designer's works. And depending on how deep you go, you could get to the point where you could then say, okay, now apply it to this shape, now apply it to this design, where this kind of a design style transfer. And we're starting to see that. I was playing today with a video remix that is open source, that's just been released. It's on Hugging Face. You can kind of play with it, where you can put in an input video, and that could be anything that you like, and then you can put in a prompt, and it will take that video and it will then reimagine that video with your prompt. So I took one of the samples that it has is a wolf that's kind of looking at it. It's a real wolf out in the wilderness that's looking around, and you can just put in a prompt, sheep, and it turns the wolf into a sheep. But the sheep is still outside. It's still in the same environment. It has the same lighting, and the sheep is looking around. So you just replace the subject. I think this creates an enormous opportunity for even further democratization. And I don't mean just for the users that we have today, but for great many new people to be able to experiment, not just with visuals, but crossing this chasm that we have right now. We've got words that can be wordsmith. We've got images that can be image smith. I don't know if that's a word, but generated images. You've got video being generated. There are a few startups and few, on the very edges, who are now creating 3D, because when it comes down to, and that's all okay, in terms of something that's beautiful to look at. But if you are a designer and you work with the real world, with real physics and real materials that need to be joined together, and things that actually need to work, then there is something more than just the pure latent space, the generative space, something more that needs to be put into these models. It's not that it's not coming. It's not that people haven't thought it. It's certainly on, the sharpest minds who are working in this space are fully aware that the models to come will not only be able to generate images for you, but they'll also a deep understanding of the physical world and how things work in the physical world and how reality actually operates. We haven't
And it doesn't
seen...
have to be complicated, right? I mean, we're talking about things like water management in the case of buildings, right? Structural loads. I mean, these are things that are not, at least in the context of buildings, terribly complicated.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a limited number of parameters that have to be taken into consideration.
And those have been solved time and time again, right? Like the engineering side of it that you're referencing there, it has a set of rules. And I think that was something in architecture that we were always kind of aware of tangentially, which was, Cam, to go back to one of your points earlier, it's like this is never going to take over the job of a creative, right? And now, like, the things that we're seeing come out of it are absolutely creative in ways that we didn't expect. And I think, one of the big, I don't want to call it a lie, but one of the things that we believed was like the engineering problems were solvable by automation a lot more so than the creative problems being solved through systems like this. I mean, AI is not automation, but it's also not too far divorced from automation. Like you can tie those things together. I think it's really interesting to see this come. And Chaos Enscape is concerned about its future, developing products that are used by people. The professionals are too, right? Like we're also concerned about it uprooting what we do, what we deliver. I think one of the things that I had a long conversation yesterday about the new era of spatial computing that is, branded by Apple, and it's now landing, and the headsets are going to become a lot more. I don't know. There's just going to be a lot more of them out there.
Yeah.
The way that people are going to spend more time in these environments and creating these digital environments is going to then inform the physical world once again, right? People are going to come out of these headsets and absolutely be disappointed in the office that they are sitting in, right? They are. I've already experienced that many years ago, being inside of my designs in a VR headset and then coming back out into my office, and it's like, well, it was better in there. And it wasn't perfect. It wasn't even photorealistic, but it was good enough to really make me feel like I was there. And that is going to inform the physical world in substantial ways, I think. Like, we're going to go into these environments that are going to be created, and they're going to be augmented with tools and AI and all of these things. Like, maybe we define the base and then it fills in details, and we're going to come back out and be like, I want to do something like that here, because it's just like what COVID did to the office. Like, I don't have a gym in my house. It was at the office. Now I want a gym in my house, right? Because this is where I'm spending my time. I don't think it's going to be unlike that with the influence that it's going to have and the impact it's going to have back on the physical world. And so to see this technology develop, and especially at the pace that it's developing, I think it's going to start, it's going to create new opportunities that have never existed. We will be spending more time designing digital environments just for digital environment's sake, just to go there, call it escapism, call it the design challenge.
So you're saying that rumors of the metaverse's demise were greatly exaggerated.
We can see it in the way
you could speak
kids,
to that.
We can see it in the way our kids, and if you have kids of a certain age, they are probably really engaged with Minecraft or with one of the other world building things, and they invite their friends.
And they're playing with people. For my kids, they have family members, all over the place, and they play with them. I think Roblox is sort of their preferred platform, mostly because it's the easiest one to collaborate with, although it's not necessarily their preferred platform to play in, but it's the easiest one to play together in. And so that it becomes sort of like their neighborhood sandbox, so to speak, which is pretty wild. Fortnite, as they get older, similar function. So what is it for the office? I mean, if the kids can spend hours in Fortnite, I'm assuming there's an office that I wouldn't mind spending hours.
Yeah, and so do you think in 10 years' time we won't be asked to prepare a PowerPoint presentation, or that we won't be asking somebody to put together a set of slides? I really hope we see that.
Yeah.
Well, so we're already seeing that with our customers, though.
Presentation, but it's just like, come on, there's got to be a better way.
We have a customer that's a fairly large construction firm, and I was talking to them about how they use our software just to get a better sense of how that particular market segment utilizes visualization. And it's a lot of the things you'd expect. They have a little bit of a business that actually designs buildings, so they have to respond. But they also do logistics and testing. Can we drive trucks around or fit behind certain equipment? But the one that really caught my attention is they actually used the Enscape software to visualize data. So if they had an RFP response and it was like a really boring graph or something like that, or some type of like a chart or something, instead of just putting it in the RFP, they would have a link. The person would scan it, and then they would go to an immersive view of the data. They said it really doesn't help the data communication all that much. It's the same data, but we found that people actually looked at it once we did this, whereas before they just be like,
right,
next
more
page.
Of the same. Because it's not the same. And I find that's a really intriguing thing that's happening. This episode is made possible with support from AVAIL. In a world where precision meets creativity, where every line drawn holds the power to innovate, people like you are shaping the future. But let's face it, in the realm of design, the unknown is your least favorite companion. You've been stranded on the island of inefficient software, lost in the fog of endless searching for the right content. It's time to embark on a new journey, a journey to clarity, efficiency, and design excellence. It's time to get off that island and away from the unknown. Introducing AVAIL, the beacon in your design odyssey. Say goodbye to the daunting 10 to 20 minutes wasted per search, the costly interruptions in your creative flow. With AVAIL, your team will zip through content discovery, focusing more on designing and less on searching. Imagine a world where you can stop constantly fighting the costly fires caused by pulling content from past projects, building from scratch, or relying on personal libraries. AVAIL isn't just a tool, it's a revolution for AECO firms. Organize, manage, and navigate your project information with a leader that's proven in reliability, relatability, and success. Join the ranks of the top AECO firms who've already chosen AVAIL. In just 30 days, you could deploy AVAIL and witness a dramatic reduction in costly design errors. Whether it's your first CMS or you're considering a switch, there's someone you should meet. Will Rouse, your guide to all things AVAIL. Schedule an appointment and explore AVAIL's capabilities, onboarding programs, and professional services. Don't let your designs be clouded by inefficiency. Clear skies are just a click away. Go to getavail.com/stranded and book a meeting with Will to start your AVAIL journey today. AVAIL, where your best design is just a search away. My thanks to AVAIL for supporting this episode of the Troxel Podcast. And now, let's get back to the conversation. One of the things that I was reading about just yesterday, I think, is that on the Apple Vision Pro, there's a Disney Plus app, and the Disney Plus app lets you watch a Star Wars movie in a Star Wars setting. So you can actually be sitting in Luke's land speeder and watching Star Wars. And it's like, I've seen that movie before, right? I've watched it many times, but I've never watched it like that. And I feel like there's going to be a lot of, and people might say, well, it's just novelty. It's like, well, and that's okay, right? I feel like this is
novelty
actually...
is value. I mean, people go to a bar to watch the game.
Right. It's going to be a thing where there's going to be new layers of fun. It won't be a dirty word. It'll be like, no, that's why I go. That's why I participate. That's why I'm here. It's because I want to have fun doing it, and because you've found a creative way to communicate these ideas to me. I think that there's so much untapped potential in.
Well, I guess the gamification you're talking about, Cam. Can we make all of this more engaging?
And how much engagement is too much engagement, though? Right, because at some point engagement becomes passe, because, and I'm starting to see that a little bit just in the AI news space. Like, hey, look, we can do this. And literally 5 minutes later, yeah, we can do that. What else have you got? And then a day later, we can do this. I was this week on Monday, I was talking to our head of AI, Jan Ring, who's just an awesome guy. And, we were having a bit of a debate, not too dissimilar to right now. We were talking about the vision, a 5-year vision, and the kind of, where is this space going, especially. Well, in that conversation, it was about VFX space and making movies, and I was saying to Dan, there's this trajectory that basically means that most of what we consider is a workflow right now is kind of, oh wow, you're still doing it like that, kind of, that's wow, do you really have to put ink in your, in your quill pen to write? That's interesting.
That's funny.
Because,
It's funny you say that. This is not an ad, but yeah, I've got my bottle of ink right here for my
there you
fountain
go.
pen.
And
Only for the best ideas.
only for the best thing.
That's a bottle of ideas right there. Yeah.
Amazing. I like that. That's good. That's spot on. And lo and behold, we were having this debate around control, because one of the things that a lot of our customers tell us is, I want to have control. I want to be able to specify exactly the thing that I want, and just for the machine, for my co-pilot to not just take the plane and take it to some place I didn't want to go, to just take care of the boring bits, the bits that is kind of going a bit flat, or I'm just going to get tired, and I don't even necessarily want it to take me to a land I'd never known before. I kind of want to go where I want to go, and I want my co-pilot to be there to help me. And we were having this debate about a startup that's kind of doing ideas to video. And, oh, well, yes, temporally not entirely as consistent it should be, and that's by that I mean, over a period of 15 seconds, the character can change a little bit, the background can change a little bit, it's a bit different. And I don't really have control on which direction this thing is going, because it's just generating something. And quite literally the next day, so had that conversation on the Monday. On Tuesday, there was an announcement by this particular company saying, now you can control like how things are moving, like, and you can control these things and decide what the trajectory on screen is. And I'm sending this to Dan and saying, Dan, the thing that we talked about on Monday looks like they've solved it. And literally today we were having a conversation. Yesterday. We were having a conversation, so like a day after, and for both of us, it's already like, yeah, we can do that now, but what we really need, right? And so
that goalpost keeps moving, doesn't it?
It keeps moving. But what you got to remember when you look at this space is, whatever it is that you think it's not doing, don't say it can't do it. It just can't do it.
It's just yet.
And there's someone working on it right now so that it can. And it will, because there's no magic in being able to represent thinking. Okay, maybe that's a big thing. I'm not talking about consciousness here. I'm talking about kind of focused thinking around something, the kind of cognition. So I'll leave consciousness to philosophers. Just cognition, just thinking about something. There's no magic anymore in being able to systematize that, because at the end of the day, what is our cognitive process? Our cognitive process can be described. It's not that dissimilar to what happens, in the brains of a creature that lived several 100 million years ago. Our brain physiology is still pretty much the same as the squid, and it's not that different. Of course, it's far more complex, and it has many other aspects playing into it. One of the interesting things that I believe will probably win the Nobel Prize, hopefully I'll see it in my life, it's an incredible piece of research that has been carried out for a number of decades, which was just published at the end of last year in Nature, where these researchers were very keen to understand the human brain and the nature of neurons. And many of us who are not in biology, including me, we kind of think, well, yeah, neurons, these things, that synapses and connections, and that's what it is. Well, it turns out the human brain has, and this is what the research had published, they wanted to know how many different types of neuron are there in the human brain. And if you'd asked me before this, I would have gone, what do you mean? It's just a neuron, right? It turns out that, the average human brain has 3,000 different kinds of neurons. And we don't actually know why are they different and how they all do, but we have 3,000 different kinds of neurons that operate differently. And it's almost like these neurons, you could kind of think of them as different appendages. Like, we thought we had 5 fingers. It turns out we have 3,000 different fingers. And not only that, what was really interesting about that was that the portion of the types of neurons that you have are as unique to you as your face and your fingerprint. So maybe I have 2% more of this kind of neuron and, 2% less than that. And these will have a huge impact on the way that we think, we feel, we experience the world, what we take in, what we can then produce. And I'm sure that at some point, our systems and our mechanisms can be sophisticated enough to start to really model even some of those nuances of how these neurons can work. And again, this is not science fiction. There is some work in this space, new ways to think about neural networks, and new topologies that get us close to this horrible feeling that the machine is alive. And, we're now in the domain of the conscious machines.
But maybe short of just being alive, that brings up one of the aspects of a lot of the AI tools that are out there is that they're one flavor. They're one set neuron types, or maybe one proportion of neurons, and that's it. And it's like, you don't get your version of these. And it gets to that idea of the training set. People want to be able to get the machine to think the way they want it to think. In some way, shape, or form, right? They want to train it so that sort of it's in their image, maybe, or what have you. And it seems like that's a pretty fertile ground. And we actually got a lot of comments along those lines, Cam, at Autodesk University. We presented some of our concepts. People were like, we like this, but we want to make it ours.
Yeah.
And frankly, we get to some degree the same feedback on our easier to use software Enscape. So people say, great visualizations, but if I go into an interview and the last firm used Enscape, and I'm using Enscape, sometimes people say, oh, I saw that person before, or, the way it looks, the style, it's similar. And the mind picks that up, and they want to create something that's their own. So even though they're using a tool, they still want the individuality out of it.
Well, I mean, that is the final outcome of democratized tools, is that everybody has the same tools, and therefore they have the
next
same.
Thing you know, we're all wearing overalls and eating the same food.
we're all wearing black Nikes, and
That's right. Drinking Kool-Aid.
Well, Roderick, you brought it up. We maybe prematurely announced the death of the metaverse before it was time. Where are we with that? Because the last time that you and I talked on the podcast, it was really about tools, workflows, putting things into the metaverse, and now again, a new hardware is coming out where the interaction with digital space is going to change. And it's not like Apple's the first one there. Obviously, there's been a lot going on there, but I do think that they're going to present it very differently to people, and it's going to change expectations.
And they're not going to call it the metaverse.
They haven't yet, right? And so where are we with that? I'm sure that you're still tracking that with your background.
For sure,
research.
I'm tracking it, and it's also still contentious. I know that Cam and I have different opinions on this, which is good, right? You want to have some of that productive friction around it. But when I look at the larger industry, I mean, the one thing that's obvious is no one's saying metaverse anymore. It's become a dirty word. If you look at the price of like a plot of land in Decentraland, I think it's gone from like $9,000 down to a couple $100 or something like that for a plot of land, like for this peak down. So clearly the people have spoken. The technical problems, though, that I felt at the time were inhibiting some of the aspects of the metaverse are still there. It still takes a lot of computational power to support an environment like that. And that hasn't changed. And so what do you have in a metaverse? Well, you have a place that visually speaking just isn't as compelling as it should be. Compared to a video game environment, it's pretty flat. Well, who wants to spend time there, right? It's like going into an office with fluorescent lights and a stained drop ceiling. I mean, it's just no fun at all. So there's that aspect of it that I think still hasn't changed. But what we are seeing, though, is places that maybe aren't metaverse by name, but are metaverse by experience, are continuing to grow. One of them is, as I mentioned earlier, Roblox. It's seen actually pretty tremendous growth. We're talking, I think it's something like 70 million users, active users or something like that. I mean, it's pretty phenomenal when you think about it. But what has it done? Well, it's captured a particular segment of the market, kids. It's made a very safe place for them to play, allows for interaction, and it's appropriately dynamic, which I think for a lot of people is exactly what they want. So that one, I'd say, yeah, it's still functioning and functioning really well, and it's vital. But we're also seeing something else, and I wouldn't say it's a strong trend at this point, but we're starting to see more and more immersive shopping type experiences that are coming up. Something that we saw recently at Crate and Barrel has a immersive store. Macy's has one, so maybe a little bit more of like a video game. And we've talked to a lot of companies in the space and some that are in 3D commerce, and they're saying they're hearing from a lot of people are asking about, hey, how can I get an immersive store? So it's not just scanning a grid of products, but it's something that's more interactive in the sense that perhaps we're actually going into it. And what's interesting about that is like so far, it's not necessarily a big money-making commerce play. It's almost more of a marketing play. It's a little bit of a unique opportunity. But just like you were saying with Vision Pro, a lot of people are saying, is that going to be the technology that proves the catalyst? Is it going to be kind of like that iPhone moment that takes smartphones from something that's kind of neat, and maybe some people have Palm Pilots and things like that, or handheld devices, to something that's truly ubiquitous? Maybe, maybe not. But I think for a lot of people, they say, well, will commerce be exactly the same in the sense that we're going through those grid products 5 years from now? Most people say probably not. No, they're going to have something that's more dynamic, that's going to increase conversion rates.
This is where, as you say, Roderick, I think maybe you and I are not entirely on the same page. Because I heard all of this 15 years ago on Second Life. I saw all of these same stories. I heard them all exactly, almost verbatim. Like, hey, this company, McKinsey's got a thing, and PA's got a thing, and Nike's got a store, and, McDonald's has got a store, and you can go, and the reality of it is, nah. And I don't think that what we've got right now is it either. And the reason you mentioned is computation is true, but as long as I have to wear something that's like heavier than these glasses, more intrusive, like literally this is probably the limit, or maybe a little bit thicker than this, but that's about it. And do not remove me from reality, So, and right now we're not there yet. Even the latest Apple headset is this giant thing that I have to stick on my head, and it's still giant, big, man.
So that's the question. Do you think it's a technology or concept, right, that's holding back? I mean, if it's the concept, right, that's never going to change. But on the flip side, if it's the technology, then obviously people are pushing in that direction. Is it here today? No. Would it be here in several years? Right. Well, honestly, it's a little bit like fusion, right? That really lightweight wearables, immersive tech is always the next thing.
It's making it easier and easier. I mean, honestly, I can see, and I don't know, maybe some of the viewers and listeners have seen the Rabbit One, the launch of this new way to be able to interact with software and with interfaces, and the idea of going from a large language model to a large action model where you can ask it to do stuff for you. And I watched the whole Rabbit One presentation, and the entire time I was thinking, why can't that just be an app on my phone? Like, why do I need to have a device? Come on, I can just have my phone be that I can just converse with it in a natural language, in a conversation, and get what I want. And I think that is a much, because for me, maybe I'm a dinosaur, but for every time the VR thing comes up, and it's just like, the world is going to be in virtual reality. Hell, it was 1997, and I was working on VRML. And you'd have to be probably as old as me, or maybe older, to remember VRML.
Raise my hand. I know exactly what you're talking about.
And VRML in 1997 was supposed to transform the shopping experience into a web front end where you entered the shop and you went around and you could see the stuff. It looked crap compared to what we've got today. If we were to do it today, it would look so much better. But I still feel that, because I think there's something there, Rod, in terms of, is it a technology thing? I think it is partially a technology thing, but in the same way as when information and access to these things, to music, became so ubiquitous, that you could just download any MP3, or you could just pay a subscription to Spotify or iTunes and just listen to absolutely any artist, pretty much within limits, right? Whenever you want. The thing that was then valuable is actually going to the concert. It's the real physical experience of actually experiencing it. That's what became valuable.
And valuable.
Right. You know, yeah, exactly. The physicality became valuable.
Right.
And I wonder if in this space we're still we need to be thinking about this too. You know, I'm amazed that the bookshops in central London, that, you know, one of the highest, at least in Europe, I don't know about the US or Japan, but in terms of per square foot rent, these numbers are eye-watering, right? They're just like, what? You pay how much for rent? That's how much, you know, a whole house costs. You know, per square foot. But these bookshops are filled with people. People want to go to the bookshop. Yeah, of course they can go to Amazon. Of course they've got their Kindle. Of course they can consume media in whilst they're laying on their bed, right? But they don't. They go and walk into the bookshop because they want to be there. They want to pick up the book physically. And amazingly, physical books sold more, at least in the UK, last year than have ever before in the history of selling books in this country.
But are they just a showroom for Amazon, right?
Well, yeah. Of course there is
a lot of stores are
kind of going, oh, I can buy it for 50p cheaper here. So
well, yeah, everything's getting more expensive.
There's a couple of things to unpack there, though. One, I think, is people's desire to have the physical, right? I mean, at the end of the day, we are living in the real world, and people, I think there is a desire for that authentic interaction. It is more desirable. It's like telling someone you went on vacation and it turned out that you bought a slide tour to go to the Azores. Just isn't going to be the same as actually going there. So there's no doubt about it, right? There's a value in that authenticity, smelling things, feeling them, and maybe the ups and downs that go along with those sort of things as well. But the other side of it too is it's not just about some of the technologies actually really are well developed. Like it doesn't have to be a VR experience. People aren't playing Fortnite or entering Roblox in VR. In VR, right? It's a traditional screen experience. So in some ways, maybe the technology's it's there, and what we're seeing is what we're seeing, and maybe a improvement in immersion isn't going to move the needle in any way.
I wonder.
Well, I think it.
Sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, at some level, I think you get to walk away from that screen, right? You would walk away from a headset too, but I think there is kind of like a nice, it's like a compartment of my life. It isn't my life. And I like to turn it on when I want to feel that, and I can turn it off when I need to do something else. I think that there's something else there that's not just about experiencing something all the time.
I would agree with that, although you always hear about phone addiction and things like that people have. So, and I guess an addiction obviously implies that people would rather turn it off if they had.
Yeah, I kind of see the opposite.
Capacity.
Yeah. Just to go back to something you said earlier, Cam, one of the reasons that the R1, the Rabbit R1 can't be an app is because that's a gatekeeper for them. I mean, you basically have to ask for permission to make something cool from the two big gatekeepers on the planet, right? And for you to only be able to deliver what they want to deliver, they're under the thumb of somebody else. And that's just something that I heard the founder say. It's like, I'm swinging for the fences because I can in this way. I can't if I do it through them.
Yeah, I can completely understand that. On that, I saw it, I thought that, but I also thought, well, Samsung is going to be doing this. There's going to be devices if that, LG is going to be doing this, all of those guys. I want to go back to the question of authenticity, because I think it for me, when I think about the future of designers and the future of creators, there is something, and I know it's not directly related to the space of VR, but for me, this is something about design, communicating design, understanding design, being able to create something that your customer, your client really wants. And whilst it's feasible that somebody could automate the entire process of maybe designing a building, I'm really doubtful whether that would ever come to fruition in the way that people pretend that it would. Because there's something more than just giving somebody the ability to write a prompt and have the full set of drawings and the the building schedule, or if it's a product, all of the kind of specifications are ready to go and to be printed and assembled. There's something here about the role of the designer as not just a conductor, but, and I'm struggling to find the right word, but the individual who navigates the design space for you or with you to arrive at the thing that you actually really want, to tease out and think about it in the process of designing a house for someone. Sure, maybe at some point I could ask a prompt and say, I've got a land that is this meter, or here's a aerial photograph, create me something. But I can't see that being, and maybe again, I'm showing my age. Right now, I can't imagine why that would be better than sitting with an architect or sitting with a designer, explaining to them the feeling that I want, explaining to them what the things that are really important to me, and going through a process. And maybe that process is augmented with AI and certainly some of the tools that we're creating, right, to help you get there faster as a co-pilot. But for the role of the designer, for the creator, they are the conduit. And perhaps they're not always necessarily the original originator, but they're the ones who make sense of what it is the customer wants, the client wants, and helps to then bring that to bear in a design, of course, with assistance, which to me is, again, goes back to this idea of authenticity. Another way that I've thought about it is any fool can go and buy a load of clothes and stick it on someone, but not everyone can actually put together a really good outfit, and
a really good outfit is one that maybe breaks the rules a little bit too.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Which I think part of what you're saying,
a lot of architecture is breaking the rules, right? Like that's the whole the building code is something that we are constantly navigating and finding workarounds.
Yeah, no one ever takes a sitting down.
Right,
in the design process. Everything's negotiated.
Right.
And I think what you're describing is almost a bit of a therapist, Cam, right? They're listening to you, they're interpreting, right? And then they're also helping you navigate what are going to be inherently a series of compromises. Everyone goes in with a BMW aspiration and a Pontiac budget. It's just, there's always a mismatch between the two. And your job is to help them navigate those. But the other thing that I always thought of when I was in practice is that people really should enjoy this process, because this might be the most money they'll ever spend on anything, ever. And well, yeah, they should have fun. This shouldn't be like pulling teeth or going to the dentist or something like that. This should be something where, in fact, they enjoy this process because they are paying a lot of money for it.
This episode is made possible with support from Confluence. Picture this: October 2019, Lexington, Kentucky, the birthplace of Confluence, a place where tech leaders, AEC product developers, and practitioners came together for 3 transformative days. It was more than a conference. It was a confluence of ideas, discussions, and unforgettable social experiences. Since then, over 200 attendees have experienced the magic of Confluence. I've had the privilege of being part of 3 of these remarkable gatherings, 2 in Kentucky and 1 in Orange County, each one a melting pot of learning, collaboration, and camaraderie around a topic shaping our industry. And now we're thrilled to announce the next regional Confluence event in April 2024 in the vibrant heart of New York City. This time, we dive deep into the realms of AI and machine learning, unraveling their mysteries and potentials in our industry. Are you interested in being part of this exciting journey? To continue the conversation, to shape the future? Visit the link in the show notes for more details. Confluence, where ideas flow, connections form, and the future of AEC technology is shaped, one conversation at a time. My thanks to Confluence for supporting this episode of the Troxel Podcast. And now, let's get back to the conversation. Absolutely. I agree with what you're talking about here, because, and I guess my question for you both is, do you see a point in time, maybe the near future, where there's a huge backlash against a lot of this AI generated stuff. And it's like there's going to be a push back to authenticity or a stamp or something that says like, this is 100% organic.
That's what I was saying. It sounds like USDA organic. I think
Right.
that there would be, right? I think there's some value in craft. It's like you can buy a knife that's probably just as well made out of a factory as one that's made by hand, but people are absolutely willing to pay hundreds of dollars for a handmade knife.
That's funny that you say that. I just watched a YouTube video of a guy who makes $200 knives basically by hand, and he blacksmiths it from the beginning to the end. And it's like, yeah, you can buy the $20 one on Amazon. Absolutely, you can. It won't fit your hand like this one fits your hand. It won't go into the sheath the way this one snaps into the sheath. It won't hold its edge as long as this one will hold its edge. And there's so many little decisions that were made along the way that were gained through wisdom and experience and application of technique over years and years of craft to establish the outcome of this process, like there is in the $20 version on Amazon. And it's like once somebody buys that knife, they're never going to want to use another kind of knife again.
But
not to say that people will want to build another building and work with an architect again.
That's right. For some people, once is enough. But what about when it's indistinguishable? I think that's a little bit of the challenge too. And I still feel like there's an inherent value in craft. I mean, you can get a print of all sorts of paintings, but people absolutely value the original.
Mm-hmm.
It's the same thing with cars. You can get a reproduction Cobra. Shelby Cobra, it's going to be worth a heck of a lot less than the real deal.
Yeah. And
in fact, it might be better than the original.
I just see that there's going to be a kind of an organization or a bifurcation of spaces online and in the real world where it's like only organic, right? It's just, this is done by hand. These are things that have been thought of by people. They're not, it's interesting, right? Because you can see communities, like the Amish community is an example of this. Not that they totally shun technology, but they study it intensely. And then they only accept technologies that reinforce their values and don't break up the values that they've established as a community. Those are the ones that stick, right? And I could see that similarly happening in this space where it's like and I think it's really going to show up a lot this year because of the elections are coming. We're seeing so much generated content, right? That it's just gonna be like, what's real? I can't even tell anymore. It's so good. I can't tell if somebody really said that. If they really
that's
thought
terrifying in some ways, right? And so what is your best option in that case? I mean, think of fraud and whatnot as well. It's needless to say, absolutely disconcerting. I still also think you can't turn your back on these tools. They're going to be there no matter what. And what we're trying to do is like I was saying before, we're trying to thread that needle and say, okay, how do we take these tools to help you become a better artist? It's like, okay, we're not trying to replace the craftsman making the knife. We're just trying to help give them, like, say, a fan that automatically blows on the coals, so replacing, say, hand blown bellows or something like that. It's that sort of thing where that's what we think is, turbine. Exactly, cranking it away, right? And if we can do that, then we think that's the ideal compromise. That's the balance that we want to achieve, because then you get the human creativity and maybe the human flaws. You get the nuance of the artist. You get all of that intent and that inspiration, but you get it in a way that people aren't having to waste that inspiration doing things that can be automated. And I think that's what can happen right now.
Well, let's talk about this. Maybe this is the third act of our conversation, which is in which ways do you have a vision for that manifesting? And I'd love for you guys to talk about whatever you're willing to talk about when it comes to products or ideas or explorations or research. But what are those co-pilot-y kind of things that you're looking at that make sense in expanding or really diving deeper into the visualization space?
We've tried to put at a high level, kind of define three main domains that we're focusing on. And I know three sounds like a lot, but then again, there's a lot of things you could do. And these are in no particular order, but the first one we're going to talk about is around assets. And assets, creating assets and capturing assets. It takes a long time to create a very unique, so be that a material, or be that a particular chair or a table or some kind of a scene or something like that you want to generate. Modeling that takes a lot of effort. Creating a material that looks really realistic, that looks as realistic as the real thing. This is what some of our software is best known for. You use V-Ray because you want to have photorealism. But guess what? You can't just start rendering because, well, what about the material? And
there's a ton of materials.
There's a ton of material, but the complexity of a material. Take what looks like that's just wood. Oh, that's just a floor. That's just a parquet floor. Well, if you were going to create that so it looked photorealistic, you might have 20 or 30 layers. It's not just the texture. It's the specularity, it's the bumps, it's the interplay of all the different things, it's the idiosyncrasies of the tiling, it's the fact that
how it butts up against the edge of the wall properly so it looks natural.
Absolutely, all of that. And that takes a huge amount of effort, where really as a designer, I just wanted a really good looking wood in the way that I was thinking. I don't want to spend 2 or 3 or 4 hours, even as a professional, having to create this, because this is just the floor. And of course it needs to look right, but I wanted to focus on the space. So some of the work that we're doing is actually very much aligned. We've got a project which should be launched this year, which is around giving you that ability to be able to create materials just through conversation, but the outcome is not an image. It's not a black box. You actually get the full material with all its layers, with all its settings. So if you wanted a little bit browner, a little bit darker here, a little bit more, highlighted, you can tweak it. You can tweak it to get it exactly where you want, but it'll do 90% of the heavy lifting for you.
Yeah, I mean, it's indistinguishable from material that you could have created manually, if you will, taking hours.
I was thinking, Roderick, when you said there's so many materials, I'm like, yeah, and none of them are right.
Yeah. Well, that's part of where you think of the conversation, right? And that's the idea. It's like, no, just a little bit this, a little bit that, and all of a sudden your iteration loop is near instantaneous.
Right.
So that's one of the spaces, and of course there are others who are working at kind of creating 3D models and things like that, and I think that's also quite interesting. But for us, the thing that our customers were asking for is, can you please cut down the amount of time it takes us to create the material that I want? To your point, because the library, I don't want that. But actually, if you could start with that, and I can then explain how I want that changed and evolved, which is the next iteration of this project is, you don't even have to start from scratch. You start from something, and then you converse to refine it and augment it. And then you still get back something that you can still control and very fine tune, accurately control. And that's, there's a whole bunch of things in there, but that's one that we will be releasing this year. Another one that we're working on, or rather another space that we're working on generally, is what we called intelligent scene, or intelligent scene understanding, or being able to understand scenes. Basically providing you software that can understand the scene that you're creating. Now, why would we want to do that? Well, there's quite a few things. If the machine could understand what it is that you're trying to do, or at least you could say to it, hey, this is a kitchen, right? Lay out the furniture for me. So it could then, in a kind of a smart way, populate the scene for you. And that may come from a set of assets you already have, or it may be generated. But in the first instance, we're going with the assets that there is in the library. So if you want to set up the kitchen, well, I've designed the kitchen. but it's going to put a table in there. It's going to put a bowl on the table. It's going to put fruit, in the bowl. It's going to put cups and things. It's going to make it look lived in. And so all of that set dressing, all of that designed to help you breathe life into that space is done for you. But again, that's not an image. It's the 3D content. So then if, chair's not quite where I want it to be,
you move
or
it. Yeah.
this is not exactly where I want, but it does all of that heavy lifting of, here we go, we've set it up for you. Do you want this setup or this setup? Okay, I'll start with this setup and then I tweak it. So, and that's kind of one application which we're working on. In that space though, if once the system can understand, or at least your intent, well, with intelligence and understanding, you could do lighting, create a particular mood. Hey, it takes, you have to be, people go to university and spend years trying to figure out exactly what the perfect lighting is. And I don't mean just for rendering. I mean, back in the real world, lighting design is a thing. It takes a lot of effort.
Yeah.
Why couldn't I say, hey, I want this kind of a mood, and for it to create me a whole set of different potential options for me to choose from, and then to refine. So again, the outcome is not just a picture on the screen, but actually is your lighting setup, and now I can refine it.
There's a lot of interest within that of saying, well, can I replicate a particular style of a visual artist or a particular firm that has great renderings and things like that. So there's an interesting angles that can go. I mean, there's no one perfect lighting solution, but I think there's a really great way of, in that case, maybe not just improving workflows and making it faster for someone to get to the conclusion, but also even giving someone who, as Cam was saying, has a real mastery, and actually making that mastery accessible to people that simply just wouldn't know how to manipulate the absolute myriad of options that you have. Pretty sophisticated piece of visualization software like V-Ray to achieve those perfect levels of lighting.
And you could also apply it on something that we all need to do, and yet, I kind of it's fear, like, hey, anyone can hold a camera, but can anyone frame a shot? Just that, just having that composition, having the eye to be able to create that composition. Well, we have professional photographers who spend years experimenting with the perfect framing, with the perfect moment and the perfect angle to capture the essence of what it is that they're trying to communicate. And somehow we just expect people to be able to go, yeah, you just put a camera in the scene and you just point it at what you want. Why is that the best outcome? And actually, I would argue, unless the person has some level of skill in being able to pick the right depth of field, pick the right not the right aperture, but the right lens size, the right it's going to be hit and miss. Well, why can't that be something that could be supported? And which is another project that we're working on, to just help you set up cameras and set up shots in a way that deliver interesting composition. And again, make it easier for you to communicate just what you can see, because we can all see and we can all go, well, that looks like a good shot, but really, it takes a real specialist. So that there's a whole load in there in terms of projects and ideas and things that we're working on. And the third kind of category for us is, and this kind of goes a little bit back to the rabbit one, internally, for us is intuitive interfaces or intuitive collaborative interfaces. What do we mean by intuitive? I mean, I don't have to remember which screen I have to go to and which option I have to pick in order to do the thing that I want. I should just be able to intuitively say, I want to modify this thing, or help me do this thing. And there is an expectation, and this is generally the trajectory, is you'll be able to talk to your software in a way that is much more intuitive than navigating a very complex menu system. Even if it's a simple menu system, in order to do something, sometimes we underestimate how much time you're spending just clicking to get to the right thing so that you can then, play with it in order to, there's a huge amount of time that takes. And an intuitive interface should allow you to just say, hey, I'm trying to do this. And either it just brings up the right screen, or ideally it kind of does it for you and just brings you up the only points of control that right. you need.
It's contextual in that way. Yeah. It's like recommending, or even learning from things you've done in the past and saying, okay, I've seen this pattern before. Here's probably what's coming next, kind of a thing.
That would be absolutely amazing to have the kind of the history of the way that you interact, and to be able to preempt you in a way that doesn't feel intrusive, actually feels quite helpful. And that's, again, we see some of that in the way that maybe if you use the Google Gmail suite, it's now kind of predicting the next few words that you're going to say. So you can just press tab. Right. Or if you tend to respond in the same way and a message comes through, one of the options is the way you talk, but apply that into the kind of into the software, into the interface. And of course, those are kind of more application oriented. And that's not to say just using machine learning to improve the visual fidelity, the level of noise that you might have in this on a thing, or everything around it. We continuously go back to our roots, which is to focus on the workflow, identify bottlenecks, identify friction points, things that are the works of a specialist. And this year we'll be bring out some amazing capabilities that allow you to visualize what your building does in the real world when it comes to energy use, and comfort and lighting and all of those factors at design time in real time. How much carbon is my building using as I'm designing it in real time?
Right. Yeah.
And these are, again, go back to kind of the workflow and the way that what happens today, it's laborious. You design something as an architect, you have to then give it to somebody else to go and analyze it for you, and maybe they'll come back to you 2 weeks later and give you a number, and you have to guess how I'm going to be able to improve that number. You have no dial that you can see in real time. If I just turn this building a little bit more, or extend this sunshade a little bit more, or angle this, or shorten this is the impact I'm going to immediate feedback.
Never mind communicating that data to those that aren't trained in the field. You show a person, like, I don't know, chart that represents this energy performance data, and they're saying, I've never seen this before. What does it mean? So
and that kind of information is so useful. It seems like a lot of these things that you're talking about, Cam and Roderick, go back to helping me as a designer sell design. And there's some designers who are allergic to that concept of framing, but that's what it actually is, right? And to link data to decisions that were made during the design process, because everybody's been through a really bad VE process, right? It's like, let's delete those sunshades off the building because they're expensive. And it's like, well, actually, they're linked to the energy model, and the way that the building performs is only possible because of those. So that's off the table, right? And for me to be able to have...
But you need all these pieces at once, though, right? You need how it looks.
You do.
And you need to know the impact on glare. And can I actually experience the glare? Because if I show someone sort of a rainbow projection, like, they know. But if you put them, say, like, they look at a view and they can see that every computer is completely washed out and no one's going to be able to see anything from 8 to 11:30 in the morning, then that's a very different deal.
Yeah.
And you can also bring into that a energy intensity and a comfort analysis that's spatially relevant and viewable within a rendering. You have a pretty powerful argument there.
You do. And when that client or that contractor or whoever it is who's questioning says, wow, you thought about that? Like, yep, that's what we do. That's why you paid us to do this, because we thought about all of that stuff. And if I have a a co-pilot helping me along the way that is kind of tallying these things and giving me feedback, like I'm watching the RPM gauge and the speedometer and the oil pressure. And when I'm driving, like that to me is super valuable. I think it sounds incredible to be able to operate in that space.
We're really excited about this one, honestly. Yeah. And it's something that one of the challenges that, just like with visualization, is that you need to have real quality to it for it to have value. You just can't have telling someone this is what your energy performance is that's not backed up by a very powerful analysis engine, the proper inputs and things like that. It's meaningless. So one of the things that we're particularly excited about is for that initiative that we partner with an outside entity called IES out of Scotland, and they have a great reputation in the industry. And so we're able to really combine sort of two best-in-class technologies, us on the visualization side, and then them with the building performance side, and then bring them together in a way that maintains our ease of use and our mechanisms for visual communication with sort of their computational power when it comes to the building performance analysis. It's a really nice combination.
When I saw you demo that product, or I don't know how it's going to work its way into one when it finally gets released, but when I saw that, I'm particularly interested in it in the same way that I was interested in what real-time rendering did to give designers the ability to use a new tool to make decisions in their already normal process, right? Because if I have the visual fidelity, I understand light and shade and shadow in real time as I'm modeling and making decisions about heights of walls, locations of things, how big is the aperture for the window to go outside, and I can see the impact of that and use that as a tool rather than at the end of a process, which you and I have talked about before, Roderick, right? Which is, this was a deliverable at the end of a process. Now it's actually front-loaded, and I'm using it to help me make decisions. The energy part of that this is a big deal, right? To be able to use that tool in real time as I'm designing to give me feedback when it comes to understanding building performance. And I never thought that would come through a visualization tool, but it makes total sense because that's the language I speak, is very visual, right?
That's what we figured, right? It's the same language people speak. Well, I will say that we actually went to a lot of different potential technology partners and asked them about potentially partnering this, and we were told by all of them until we got to IES that this wasn't possible. So that's how you know you're onto something good when it comes to innovation. So when people say, "No, it can't be done. Sorry, too hard." And so I think what's fun about this one is that we are aligning sort of philosophically with our intent as a software, maintaining that ease of use. And what that does all of a sudden is it greatly expands the accessibility of the energy performance. Cam said, maybe wait 2 weeks to get back your building performance models. I can assure you it's a heck of a lot longer than that, usually. And that's the beauty of something like this, is now we're making it just like with rendering, where you used to have to send it out to potentially a outside specialist firm, or maybe it was just so complicated you only did it once for a phase, for like the big thing to get the donors on board, if you will, for the project or something like that. Now you can do it iteratively, and all of a sudden that changes, right? It changes the nature of what visualization means in design, is that it's actually a tool for all the little decisions you have to make, as opposed to just sort of big fait accompli. And same thing with building performance. Now it's not just like, well, that's where we landed.
Yeah.
Tough deal.
Now let's justify it.
Yeah, exactly.
Post justification. I mean, and really it takes tools like this. I think there would be people who will be nervous about this because it to our point earlier about it democratizing it, and it just becomes table stakes. Everybody's got to do this. In this regard, this is a really huge benefit for the entire industry to get tools like this informing the design as they go along. I don't have to send it out. I don't have to wait 2 weeks. I get the feedback immediately. I know if that decision is good or bad immediately, and we can move forward and use that tool to make our buildings better immediately. I think that is the kind of thing that shouldn't scare anybody, and the democratization of tools like this is really going to help the industry move forward in meaningful ways very quickly.
But we don't want to, just like with AI, right? We don't want to take away people's jobs here, right? We want to preserve certain knowledge that aspects of the industry have. And engineers in particular, they're incredibly knowledgeable. the great thing about partnering with IES is that they have outstanding engineering grade analysis tool. And so we use the same engine as they use in their tool. And we also use the same inputs. We just happen to package them up into template files that are sort of pre-sorted, if you will, with a more limited array of manipulation for a particular context. But what's really fascinating is it opens up a particularly unique workflow where an engineer that's using the IES sort of professional grade software, the IES VE software, can actually create one of these template files for the project that they're doing for their certification level analysis, and they can actually share that with the architect as an input for the analysis that they're performing in real time in Enscape. And so all of a sudden now it opens up an opportunity where your building performance analysis in Enscape can happen in real time at the same fidelity and using the same assumptions and inputs and things like that as the engineering level model, which that's never happened before. And I think what's great about that is it preserves the expertise of the engineer, but brings that same level of quality of real time to the architect.
That's right.
And it gives that engineer, when it ends up back on their desk later, some assurance that it's going to be.
Well, it's more than some assurance, right?
Yeah.
It's yeah.
Right. Exactly.
And this is so. Maybe it's implied in our conversation, but this is so much more than just justifying our design. This is our imperative to make sure that we build a world that uses less energy, that we address the real. It's more than an elephant, right? It's the entire zoo that's in the room, which is climate change and the impact of the greenhouse gases that are having on our planet, and will continue to do so, certainly for the remainder of my life. And whatever it is that we can do to address this in as many ways as possible. And having tools like this are certainly going to have a huge impact on being able to make better decisions, not just for the design, for the architect, but for the planet. And I know that sounds really grandiose, but really that is what it is, right? And it can
making better decisions sooner only helps the process. Like making a great decision late in the game that has to undo or redo a bunch of stuff is not. It's cost a lot of money to do that, right? And so,
but how do you make those decisions, right? It's not just the data; it's how that data is presented, how that story is told. And what's great is that Enscape is already using to tell that visual story, and that one of the key components we'll be launching with is that visual story. One of those visual stories you can tell now is not just how it looks in a purely aesthetic term, but within that same environment, how it performs. So you can see in a building, the same rendered view, say, where are your energy hotspots? Where are my problem areas? Where are things great? Where are people comfortable? Where are they uncomfortable? It makes it much easier to essentially sell, because at the end of the day, someone's writing a check for all of this.
Right.
And if they don't understand the data, they don't understand the story that you're telling them, then how are you going to get them to go along with a certain decision that you're trying to advocate?
Yeah. I'm glad you brought that up about that, because the data presentation is one thing, but the way it can be communicated and ultimately understood is where the rubber meets the road, right? Because if you can't build it, it doesn't count, right? It's just paper architecture. And the point here is to build better buildings. And so I'm surprised to see tools like this coming from a visualization company. And I shouldn't be surprised because of the people I'm talking to, because you're thinking much bigger about the problem and the challenges than we've ever experienced before. I know that there's a lot of people in our industry who are wicked smart and doing the same caliber type of thing that you're doing. I'm really excited to see that coming from you, and it's coming from an unexpected place, but I'm happy that it's coming at all.
I think it's coming from the place that had the hardest problem to solve, which was that visual side. How do you tell the story with this data? There's a lot of different tools out there on energy analysis, and the biggest difference among them is sort of it's the calculation engine, obviously, but it's also how complex or what kind of user interface you might have. I mean, some of them are just spreadsheets, right? Some of them are, there's
it's
really
like flying a 747.
Yeah, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that why it's coming from a company like us, and why I think it had to, is that we just brought this imperative of ease of use and visual communication that you just wouldn't see from sort of an engineering energy model first company.
And our driving force is to really focus on workflow and to democratize. Make things that are for specialists as easy to use for designers, so that they can really leverage it in their decision-making process, and to focus on the workflow. And this, of course, it's easy to say, well, now we know, of course, it's obvious, but this is the approach. Look at the workflow and identify elements of friction, identify pieces where you think, oh, well, that's a real specialist. To Rod's earlier point, I have to send this off for someone to do the visualization. I have to send it off to someone to calculate this piece. I have to send.
Talk
and
about
every
loss
time
of
we
control,
hear that,
right?
Yeah.
Every time we hear that and we see that, the kind of little ears prick up. Hang on a minute, can this be made so that you can flex it as a part of your design experience? I mean, and it's maybe this is because, and I know, I'm in company of friends, but maybe this is the architect in me, kind of looking at our profession over the last decades and maybe longer, and seeing how it went from the architect who had complete control over every component, the structure, the design, the every piece, to it becoming compartmentalized into a series of very narrowly defined disciplines. So the architect is now no longer in charge of the structure, in charge of the services, in charge of the lighting, in charge of the materials. No, it's just no longer, it's kind of, and then now looking back at technology and going, hang on, can we just bring some of this back into the design so that we can really flex what a building looks like, feels like, and perhaps even how it's built as we're designing, as we're thinking about the design itself. That'll be an awesome outcome. Just then, I'm not making apologies, but that would be a great thing as an architect, seeing tools that really help somebody make better decisions from the multifaceted angle that we have historically meant to have, and should.
So it's a cohesive solution, right? It's not just a bunch of parts that have been stuck together, because if you have that, we've used the term all over, for decades and decades about the master builder, but this idea of somebody who is the orchestrator, and that could be a small team of people, or it could be a person, but it's that kind of thinking to bring the level of craft of really making sure all those puzzle pieces fit together exactly like how they intend.
And maybe to bring it down to the sad reality too of clawing back some fee, because that's the other side of it. That's been hurting.
It's worth something, right? Well, gentlemen, I appreciate you sharing these visions with us and sharing a bit of the roadmap of things that are to come, and maybe some unexpected things that are going to be coming. I appreciate you taking that time to spend and elaborate on the things that we were talking about at Autodesk University with the audience here, because we didn't get to record that one. So that's the whole point of doing this, is to bring it to a wider audience. And it's been fantastic hanging out with you guys today. I'm going to provide links to everywhere that people can find you, so they can connect with you online, on LinkedIn, to your website, places like that where they can find out more information.
And Chaos Next, of course. It's chaos.com/next is the particular website where you'll find a lot of our AI initiatives. Nice.
All right. Well, that'll go in the show notes as well. So Cam and Roderick, thank you so much for spending time with me today. It's been great.
So much. Thanks, Rob.
Our pleasure.
Thanks to our sponsors, and thanks to our members this week. Find out how you can become a member at trxl.co, and I'll talk to you again next week.